Good morning, everyone. Just a quick note to say that we will be starting in about 15 minutes. Good morning and welcome to the attendees who have joined. We will be starting in 10 minutes. Good morning, everyone. It is 8:55. We will be getting started in 5 minutes. So welcome to everyone who's joined already. I'm getting excited. We're at the 3-minute mark. We'll be getting started soon. We will be getting started in 1 minute now. Good morning, everyone. I am Brooke Gilmore. I'm going to be your MC for today. When I am not MCing online events, I am the Sustainability Manager at St. Lawrence College in Kingston, Ontario, where I am streaming today from my office, my home office. So I hope everyone's safe and doing well in their homes and comfortable. So I'm so excited to be here and to kick off the event. Today marks the 4th annual Kingston's Climate Change Symposium. We have an amazing lineup of speakers. So today's event is a result of a close partnership with the City of Kingston, Sustainable Kingston, and this year's theme is resilience. So how do we build a resilience community? How do we work together to make a collective positive change and move closer to our goal of becoming Canada's most sustainable city? I want to thank all of our sponsors for today's event. We have Queen's University, St. Lawrence College, and Empire Life. So thank you so much for making this possible. My job is to get through some housekeeping items to start before we get to hear all the amazing speakers that we have today. Pretty cool. We've got some, I'm seeing the chat. We've got some folks from Arizona. We have someone from Kingston, New York. So I welcome everyone from all of the communities, wherever you might be coming from. So this session is live streamed on YouTube. And we are in live chat. So some people might be on Zoom with us. Some folks might be on might be tuning in through the city's live YouTube channel. So to protect everyone's privacy, we will have all participants have their video turned off and your mics turned off. So the Zoom function in chat, like you won't be able to talk. We do have the Q&A section. So I'll explain a little bit later in detail about how that questions work. We do have options for you to ask questions within this technology. So of course, speaking of technology, thank you for changing the slide. We're on, some of you are on Zoom, some of you are joining us on YouTube. Technology happens, there's trouble, so please be patient with us. We'll do our best to support you. There is a small team of awesome folks working to help you with any technical difficulties that you might have. But there is a couple of things that you can do to make it more enjoyable for you. There is in the top right of your screen, you can switch your view to speaker, to gallery to speaker view, so you can see the presentation and you can see the speakers talking. If you have the unfortunate event when your internet goes down, you do have the option to call in. There is a number on the screen. I believe, or we'll type the number in the chat box. You can write that number down and you can call into the event. All else fails too, if you're able to get back on the internet, you can join on YouTube. The only difference there is there's just not the Q&A function, but you can see everything and follow along with us. Again, we'll do our best to help you. Sometimes, you know, restarting things, if you are having trouble, of course, logging off, restart your computer, log back on. Sometimes that does help with some technical issues that you may have. So for those asking questions in Zoom, we do have that chat, the Q&A function. If you move your mouse, you'll see that there's a black bar at the bottom of the screen and it says Q&A. That is where you can ask your questions. And we will be following along. Some of the times I will get notified that there's questions. If there is an abundance of questions, we possibly might not be able to get through all of them. We will do our best, but we might not get all the questions. And if you are on YouTube streaming and you really have a pending question, you can reach out to the folks at SK via email and send them an email. We might not be able to get back to you today, but we can probably follow up with your question. So we'll do our best to get back to that, to get back to you with any questions that you might have. Here is the, I'm not sure if we have the raise hand function in this right now, but we do have the Q&A function. So, but we will monitoring it. If you are joining us on YouTube and you want to share your experience, please use the hashtag Climate Symposium 2021. So the next announcement is, so we do have, Kingston is I love our city. We are brewing with wonderful things happening. And this is just another example of another great thing that's coming up. On January 26th and 27th, there is a Smart Energy Conference. This event brings together experts, innovators, and distributors from across Canada to network and exchange ideas with energy leaders, commercial customers, academics, policymakers from the smart, clean, and renewable energy sector in Kingston. So I know I'll be joining. I hope you guys can join too. Next is just to review the agenda that we are going through today. I'm going to be done soon. I'm going to pass this over to our mayor, who's going to do some opening remarks. We've got David Phillips coming up at 9:05. We'll do some wellness breaks. Henrique Benites is speaking next. Then we have Lori Nikkel. And then at 10:30, we've got Julie Salter-Keane from the City of Kingston, another wellness break to let you stretch your legs, do your thing, get some water. At 11 a.m., then we have Severn Cullis-Suzuki, I'm super excited about, and then we have some closing remarks. So there is, in the chat function, we do have those. If you do have any troubles, there's the number to call in now, so please write that down. If you do have any troubles, you can call in and listen to it. I am going to mute myself and turn off my screen and pass it over to our mayor. Welcome, Mayor Patterson.
Well, good morning, and thanks very much, Brooke. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, everybody that is joining us online. Welcome officially to the 2021 Kingston Climate Change Symposium. Just delighted, excited about the amazing lineup of speakers that we have on tap for you this morning. So I'm going to begin with the First People's recognition statement. This is the statement that I read at the beginning of every council meeting, and certainly when it comes to great and important functions like this one today. Sego ani buju endio wacheya kwekwe. As the mayor of the City of Kingston, I offer these words in the spirit of this gathering. Let us bring our good minds and hearts together as one, to honor and celebrate these traditional lands as a gathering place of the original peoples and their ancestors who were entrusted to care for Mother Earth since time immemorial. It is with deep humility that we acknowledge and offer our gratitude for their contributions to this community, having respect for all as we share this space now and walk side by side into the future. Now, I certainly do not want to be accused of cutting into Dave Phillips' speaking time, so I'm going to be quick and to the point, but I will say on behalf of the City of Kingston, just how excited and proud we are to be able to be a partner in today's symposium along with Sustainable Kingston, Queen's, St. Lawrence College, Empire Life, and a lot of other great community partners. There's no question that here, we get it here in Kingston. This is a defining issue of our time, and we're committed to local action to demonstrate leadership that I think in turn can inspire other municipalities across the country and around the world to take their action on climate change. It's been exciting to see the investments that we've made to encourage more electric vehicles. We're soon going to have our first electric bus on the road. At our council meeting next week, we're introducing a couple of exciting programs to encourage energy efficient retrofits at homes and to encourage the construction of net zero buildings. So there's lots of great stuff on tap, but really being able to, the more we know, the better positioned we are to take action on this, this important issue. And so I'm really excited to hear from our first speaker and certainly from all the speakers here this morning. So it's actually my great pleasure to introduce our first speaker. And I think it's fair to say he's a household name that I'm sure that many Canadians and Kingstonians would certainly recognize. David Phillips has been employed with Environment Canada's Weather Service for 50 years. His work activities relate to the study of the climate of Canada and to promote awareness and understanding of meteorology. He has published several books, papers, and reports, including a book on the climates of Canada and two bestsellers, The Day Niagara Falls Ran Dry and Blame It on the Weather. He was the originator and author of the Canadian Weather Trivia Calendar. David frequently appears on national radio and television as a commentator on weather and climate matters. He's been awarded the Commemorative Medal for the 125th anniversary of the Confederation of Canada, the Queen Elizabeth Golden and Diamond Jubilee Medals, and has twice received the Public Service Merit Award. David is the recipient of 3 honorary doctorates. Yes, 3 honorary doctorates from the Universities of Waterloo and Windsor and Nipissing University. In 2001, David was named to the Order of Canada. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm wondering if you could join me in a very warm welcome to our guest speaker, David Phillips. David, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Really looking forward to everything you have to share with us.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor Patterson, for those very kind words of introduction and for the opportunity to speak at this great symposium. It's becoming a world-class event. I think 4 years, I think 3 years ago, I spoke at it and had a wonderful time. And here I am back again to talk to you about our favorite topic of conversation as Canadians. I mean, soon we won't be talking about Donald Trump anymore. We go back to talking about the weather and that love-hate relationship we have with the weather. But Mr. Mayor, I really wanted to really thank you and your councillors in Kingston for the response to the growing threat of climate change. I mean, nearly 2 years ago, your council renamed this growing threat of climate change to a climate emergency. And you were the first in Ontario to do so, one of the first in Canada, and first really around the world. And it wasn't just wordsmithing. I mean, you put actions to these words. And through your climate leadership plan, which comprises all city staff, I mean, not just, hey, you should think about climate change, but hey, think about it as a need and make sure that it's factored into all of our strategies and plans and policies that go forward. You have reached out to technical professional people to make sure you're on the right track with regards to the science of climate change. And you certainly have engaged with community stakeholders and partner groups, all publics, to make sure that this is one of the most sustainable communities in the world. And it's really a model that needs to be exported elsewhere. I congratulate you on that. Now, you know, I often boast that we live in one of the healthiest and safest climates in the world. I mean, there are more Canadians die falling out of bed than die from weather. But it's not because we have a gentle climate in this country. We are the flashpoint between cold air to the north and warm air to the south. And what is weather? Well, it's when warm air dukes it out with cold air. And it's the battleground seems to be happening along the southern borders of Canada. You know, in an average year, we get perhaps 2 or 3 tropical storms. This year, we had 8 storms of this nature that entered Canadian waters. We are the second most tornado-prone country in the world. You know, we get 80 to about 80 tropical storms. We had in Ontario this year 43 tornadoes, and that's probably a record for the province. We get 3 million lightning hits in an average year, and temperatures that vary in this country from plus 40 to minus 50. Now, projections have it by the middle of this century that we will inherit the climate of the United States. That Kingston will be more like Nashville in terms of its climate, or Louisville. And that's important because the United States gets more severe weather than any other country on this planet. I mean, no place in Canada is going to look like it in 40 years like it does now. And every Canadian city will be affected. And some people will be affected more than others. I mean, certainly the elderly, the refugees, the unemployed, the poor and children, the infirmed will be more stressed and concerned and beat up by climate change. And actually, you know, we really don't have to wait for it. I mean, already weather's having an increasingly greater effect on us because it is changing so quickly, and yet we can't adapt to it very quickly. Before, I think, believe it or not, we may be, in spite of the pandemic, we may be living through the good old times, because in fact, it's going to get even more stressful in the years to come. As they say, stay tuned. We haven't seen anything yet. It's likely to get weirder, wilder, and wackier in the coming years. Now, you can tell that I've been around for a long time. Hey, as the mayor said, over 50 years. And I've certainly seen a lot of changes. I remember the very first media interview I had back in the 1970s, and we had a very cold, snowy decade in that 70s, was about, should we look to the north to see if this ice front was moving closer to us? And well, I mean, we've now gone from the ice age cometh to the overheated planet. I mean, those things occur in eons of geological time, and I've been around for both of them. So I know I've been around a long time. But I've seen a tremendous change in our understanding of the science of climate change in the last 30 years. We used to think that climate change was about something that was global or hemispheric. We recognize now it has a local flavor. And we really began to, when climate change began to hit home, it started hitting our homes, you say. We also have seen climate as a system that has covered centuries or eons of time. And now it's affecting us in decades or even shorter. What we used to see as climate averages is now more weather extremes, you say. And it's not futuristic. It's not the, what our grandchildren will face. It's the here and now. It's happening now, and we can see it and we can actually feel it. And the rate of change is not it's almost a roadrunner change as opposed to a tortoise kind of change. And the other thing too is even the name has changed. We've gone from something that we call global warming because we recognize it was more than temperatures that were changing to climate change, which is really a better word, a better description, or climate emergency. I think if we called it atmospheric terrorism, we'd have this thing nailed to the ground. But certainly I think also the solution of this problem has changed. We've gone from, mitigation, cutting back on fossil fuels, which, hey, I don't think has gone very far, to adapting, maybe sucking it up, accepting the fact, hey, that the world is changing and that what we need to do is not just hide our head in the sand, but to build resiliency, to build a more weatherproof community. And the key lessons that we have learned is from events like Hurricane Igor or Sandy or Harvey or some of the urban flooding that we've seen in Calgary or in Toronto in 2013 or the Fort McMurray fires back just a couple of years ago, is that we're not prepared for the climate we've got, let alone the climate we're going to get. So you see, ladies and gentlemen, I think the change has really been important. We've gone from climate and its averages to weather and its extremes. And I think this redirection is hugely important because while we plan for climate, we live in the weather. And we look out the window and we can't see climate, we see weather. And when you've got the enemy, you kind of need to know what it looks like. Even with the pandemic, that microscopic COVID-19 virus, I mean, at least we've seen pictures of it. It scares the bejeebies out of us. It causes us to be concerned and into action. But climate, you can't see it, you see. Climate is distant. It's exotic. It's irrelevant to my daily life. It's academic. I mean, what is climate? Climate is the statistics of weather. It's statistical, it's abstract, but weather is more experiential. It's more decisions we make daily are based on the weather. So I think this is a very important step that we've seen. People are more engaged in it because they see it as a change of weather, not just as something that academics discuss as a change in climate. Now, what is up with the weather? Well, in recent years, the vast majority of Canadians have been cursed and clobbered a lot harder and more often by weather extremes. It's almost the stuff of Hollywood catastrophes: hailers, deluges, ice rains, super typhoons, and weather bombs. It's almost biblical in nature or Hollywood type in nature. And it used to be that we as Canadians used to think that we were immune from this. I mean, this affected people on the other side of the world who to societies different than ours. We're of the opinion that 100-year storms occurred every 100 years, you say. I mean, it was almost, it wasn't as if weather was more, predictable, but it was more foreseeable. It's almost as if we lived in this kind of historical range of variability. Storms occurred there. Summers were hot and winters were cold. There were fewer surprises, you say. But now what we're seeing is these events are breaking out of this familiarity that we have. We're seeing that we've never seen before. It seems easier to create these kinds of things. And at the same time, our infrastructure is built in the 50s, 60s, and 70s is not functioning. I mean, our floodproofing mechanisms are not working. Our roads are breaking up and cracking, and our bridges are cracking. Our sinkholes appearing in our highways. Our sewer pipes are leaking and cracking. And I can guarantee you, it's not a third world situation. In Canada, we probably have 600 communities that have boil water advisories, you say. And so I think for me, that epiphany, that moment where it really changed for me was probably the Saguenay flood back in 1996. I remember that day. It was a Sunday. I was walking to the store from my home to pick up a newspaper, and there it was, Canada's first billion-dollar weather-related disaster. More water fell on the Saguenay that weekend than would flow over Niagara Falls in 2 months. And then came the ice storm from hell. From Kingston, yes, from Kingston to the Bay of Fundy, brought down more wire and cable in 5 days and went stretch around the world in or 3 times the amount of wire and cable that would stretch around the world. We saw greatest number of insurance claims ever for any geophysical event on this planet. So nobody really has been left out in the cold. Nobody's immune from these ravages. Doesn't matter whether you're rural or urban or province or territory or north or south, we've all been beat up. And Ontario has had its share of extremes. We've had terrible floods, not just snow melting, ice jamming floods. We, of course, have seen droughts. We have seen ice storms, of course, one that I described in 1998. Other events we've seen, I remember in September of 2004 in the Kingston area, we had Hurricane or Tropical Storm Francis came through in September the 8th or 9th, dumped 135 millimeters of rain. It was the wettest moment in Kingston's history. If it hadn't been for that rainstorm, it would have been the driest month on record. I mean, how weird and wild is that? We saw, for example, in March of 2012, the last day of summer was 21 degrees in Kingston. I mean, even the chilly waters of Lake Ontario couldn't reduce that temperature down. And we saw 14 days where double-digit temperatures. People were out at golf courses and garden centers. This was wonderful. Well, farmers knew the difference. They knew that this was dangerous, that frost was going to come. And then what they ended up with, blossoms being nipped, the apple industry killed, $100 million in damage from that, just those frosts that occurred after that glorious, supposedly, moment. So what can we conclude? And I can spend all day talking about the misery, hardship, and misfortune about weather extremes. But what can we conclude? Well, I think that we can certainly say that weather disasters are becoming a growth sector. Canada's becoming a more dangerous place to live because of wild and extreme weather. Not killing more people. In fact, globally, fewer people are dying from weather, but the dislocation, the disruption, the inconvenience, the hardship that it's bringing because of wild and chaotic and turbulent conditions is unprecedented. We've seen the costs of these systems have increased dramatically. I mean, don't take my word for it, just ask your insurance agent. They're paying out more for weather and water now than they pay for fires, which is the reason they got going in the first place. They think it's meteorological mayhem. They think it's weather that's that truly is just happening like it's never happened before, you say. And a couple of non-climate reasons are in effect. First of all, we have more property damage. I mean, that smelly old basement I stored my bike in as a kid is probably now a fitness center and entertainment room. Every time it floods in Kingston, it's going to cost somebody $40,000, whether it be the insurance, person who doesn't have insurance, or the city. I mean, it's a big ticket item. And also, we're living where we shouldn't be living, in floodplains, an avalanche zone, and by the sea. I mean, a third of the people in the world live within 100 kilometers of the ocean. These are graveyards in the waiting. There's greater risk and greater targets when you live in these environmentally vulnerable areas. And we're also seeing that the rising trends has got governments concerned. I mean, governments used to treat weather disasters or extremes like snow removal budgets. You didn't factor it in. Some years you'd win, some years you'd lose. But now it's affecting our balance of payments, our economic indicators. And we're seeing there's the government fund called the Disaster Financial Assistance Relief Fund. They've paid out more for weather and water in the last 6 years than they paid out in the previous 39 years. And industry and business is also seeing the effects. Corporate world used to think this in the 90s was a suspicion, this climate change. Now it's an urgency. And stakeholders and shareholders are asking chief executive officers, hey, not do you believe in climate change, but what are you doing about it? And the good news on a positive side is that more and more companies are saying that climate change is the #1 issue for economic prosperity and preserving global economies. So what is behind all of this apparent increase in weird, wild, and extreme weather? Well, hey, a couple of things we have to get straight. It's important to realize that we're not seeing any new weather. No. It's the same weather that our grandparents did, but past centuries dealt with. I mean, I wish it was different. I wish it was typhoons in Tweed or sandstorms in Sandy Banks or monsoons in Mallory Town. I mean, hey, that would be good. At least we would, in fact, say the world's upside down. People would be leaving it and we would be armed, ready to do something about it. But you see, it's the same old weather. What's different about it, though, is that it's much larger, more frequent. Things are out of season, out of place. Weather has slowed down. I used to think the best thing about Canadian weather is the extreme weather hits and runs. Now it's raining on Thursday and still raining on Saturday. It's more time to spread its misery. We've also seen more back-to-back or catastrophic events that seem to overlap and never ending. I mean, in Windsor, Ontario, they've had 2 storms of the century in 11 months. I mean, tell the mayor there that that climate change is not a major concern. What we're also seeing too is that what we're seeing often that weather events are a multitude of events are happening. It's not just sort of large hailstones that are falling. It's strong winds that are in fact causing the chaos and destruction. It's like forest fires. You have a forest fire, it destroys all the vegetation, and then when the wet season comes, my gosh, you get a landslide and flooding, and then the grass or the vegetation, the brushes, they grow, and then they dry out and they're hit by lightning, and hey, another wildfire, you say. So what we're seeing are this kind of combination of multi events, even in ocean areas. What we're seeing, you say, is that the sea levels have risen. So even if the storms aren't stormier, but with higher sea levels, there's going to be more inundation when these storms do push that water inland. Another thing too, it's important to remember. It's important to remember that climate change does not create extreme weather. It does not cause heat waves. It doesn't cause wildfires. Storms happen in normal times. We live on a planet of extremes. Storms were hitting this planet, superstorms, before humankind ever set foot on this planet. And they will be doing that even after we leave this planet. What climate change does is it sets the stage. It kind of makes the weather worse or potentially more impactful. I liken it to a home run hitter. You pay a slugger to hit home runs, and he hits them into the stands. People are happy, the team wins. but you feed him steroids, and all of a sudden he hits more home runs and he hits them out of the ballpark. Well, that's what climate change is. It's like the steroids for weather. It makes it bigger and badder and more impactful. Now, something else that we have to get straight is that the weather of yesteryear is different than today, because it's not just what's falling from the sky. You know, rain falls from the sky, and that used to be the important thing. Now we have to ask, where is it falling? What kind of surface is it falling on? Our landscapes have been re-engineered, have been environmentally degraded. We've cut down trees and not replaced them. We are taking rivers and taming them or straightening them. We are reclaiming land from the sea. We're building dams and reservoirs on our water courses. And this changes the flow of these water courses. I'm not against that, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not against building dams and reservoirs. I'm just saying, hey, it's reality. 100 years ago, there were no dams in the world over 15 meters. Now there are 40,000. So no wonder the great rivers are mere trickles by the time they enter the sea. The other thing that we have done, very tragically here in Ontario, is that we have drained the swamp. We have filled in floodplains. We think progress is taking cesspools, mosquito-infested standing water, and building condos and turning it into farm fields. I think we have seen in this province 72% of our wetlands have disappeared. And in some cases, 90% of our wetlands have disappeared. It is the way nature has protected us from the past. And I think that is, in fact, a major tragedy that has occurred in this country, the disappearance of our wetlands. Now, last month, I mean, despite criticism from a number of municipal governments, environmental groups, and general public, the province enacted legislation to weaken the powers of the local conservation authorities. And these agencies were set up 70 years ago to help prevent flooding and safer water and increase biodiversity. But authorities, these conservation authorities, are now forced to issue permits to allow development on lands that are environmentally sensitive, even going against what their scientists and experts are telling them that they should do. And I think it's disheartening, really. And I apologize for this little plug or this little concern, political concern I have, but to see the good work of our conservation authorities, and in fact, are being undermined. I mean, they're forced to negotiate agreements that would trade one region for another region. I mean, that's a scam. I mean, replacing wetlands is not the same as preserving wetlands that it took nature thousands of years to form. Now, there's also another issue at hand that we have to consider is urbanization. It's the greatest land transformation in the world. It doesn't represent a large area of the land use, but it's the greatest change that we see taking place. I mean, this is the first time in the world that there are more people living in cities than in rural areas. And by 2040, it's estimated 2/3 of the people will be living in developed areas and creating urban heat islands. In Canada, we defy all odds. We're probably the lowest population density, but we're most urbanized. 85% of Canadians live in communities that are built up, are more than 10,000 people. And so I think that's a concern, clearly. By bulldozing and paving and over the kind of wetlands and wildlands and woodlots and turning them into parking lots and strip malls and cloverleafs on highways, we tame that green infrastructure to gray infrastructure, and we clearly see a loss of sustainability and balance. In most cities, I mean, 50% or more of the surfaces are impervious to rain, to water. I mean, we call it the Walmart effect. If it rains on a grassy knoll, it takes 8 hours to get down to the aquifers. On a parking lot, it takes 8 minutes. So it doesn't matter how dry Kingston is, that raindrop becomes a flood drop. And that is a concern. Flooding, you see, is an act of God, but floods and flood disasters are an act of humankind. You can't change the weather, but you can certainly change the way we deal with the weather. And of course, something else has changed, ladies and gentlemen. Our climate has changed. There's overwhelming consensus. I mean, you can't get scientists to agree on anything. 98% of scientists believe the world is warming up faster and greater now than it has in a long time, and that our DNA is all over it. Evidence is overwhelming everywhere. It doesn't matter whether it's the tip of the stratosphere or the depths of a bog or a sinkhole or a borehole. The evidence is there, and there's no convincing alternative explanation. When you take all of the physical reasons why the world warms up and cools down, in the last 35 years, looking just at the physical explanations, the world should have gone through some modest cooling. Instead, it's got runaway warming. And you clearly know, and the evidence is there. I mean, just this week, it was reported that 2020 was the tied 2016 is the second warmest year on record in the last 135 years. And this was a La Nina year. I mean, it wasn't even close to 2016. 2020 is clearly the warmest if you took out the La Nina cooling effect. I mean, the last time the Earth was warmer than it is now was 120,000 years ago. And the evidence is not just thermometers and rain gauges, it's everywhere. I mean, we have seen, for example, in the oceans. The heat reserve in the oceans is much higher now than it's ever been in, say, 200 years of observing. It's become, oceans are less salty, more acidic. They're taking, thank God, the oceans are absorbing some of that CO2, that weak carbonic acid of the atmosphere, and absorbing it. I mean, ruining ocean life, but hey, it's kind of shielding us from a lot more misery than we would have if it hadn't done it. We're seeing global sea levels have risen, not only because temperatures are warmer, but because the ice caps are melting, you say. And we've seen, of course, in the Arctic, the disappearance of the ice, the texture, the type of ice, the concentration, the volume of ice is just absolutely changing like never before. And much to the peril of northern peoples, you say. And of course, we've also seen glaciers. I mean, we are the more glaciers in Canada than any other country in the world. And they're melting 6 times faster now than they did in the 1980s. And in the lifetime of 65% of Ontarians, we will see the ice caps disappear in southern Canada because of runaway warming. And Canada has warmed up twice as much in half the time. More in the winter than the summer, more in the north and the south, more in the middle of the continents than in the outside. Ontario has warmed up. I don't have a graph or a time series for Kingston, more of a fractured kind of time record, but Ottawa, a golden record up there at the farm in Ottawa, so it's not tainted by urban heat islands. We see about a 2-degree warming in the last 100 years. In Kingston, we are seeing, for example, the number of hot days in the summer, twice as much as it was 100 years ago, the number of hot nights, twice as much as it used to be. And it's those night temperatures that worry me. It's where most of the deaths occur from heat waves. Here's just a little graphic to show you that in Toronto, for example, the number of consecutive hot nights in the summer now compared to 100 years ago, you see these single day, maybe once every 2 nights back 100 years ago. And now they are occurring as, a week, 10 days, 12 days long. And that's clearly lethal. So that's a, so what will this mean? What should we, what should we be worried about this? So I go to Winnipeg, I talk to Winnipeggers, and we are the second coldest country in the world. We are the snowiest country in the world. Winnipeggers say to me, I say, your winters are going to be 5 degrees warming. That's bad news. And they say, well, I'm freezing my ass off. Could you make it 10 degrees? So, we probably, from a cost benefit analysis in the short term, we probably have some benefit of warming up, but in the long term, it would really be concerning. Because not slushier winters and earlier springs, it's about greater extremes of weather. Good reason to believe that the weather is becoming more violent and extreme. It's not complicated, ladies and gentlemen. When you warm up the world, you have the energy that fuels storms. For every degree of warming, The atmosphere can hold 7 to 12% more moisture. But you can do the math. A 3-degree warming, that garden variety thunderstorm, you're going to have a lot more rain to fall on you than it did in the past. And these extremes are not just one-offs. They're not just bad luck. This is not just a fluctuation. This is a trend. Weather extremes are not going away. The other thing that we need to concern ourselves is variability. Now, I know farmers understand variability. They don't always believe what I say about climate change, but they understand variability, what they've been saying. I've had farmers say to me the last couple of years, my gosh, I could have had, in this growing season, I could have had a flood insurance, and I could have had, a drought insurance in the same time. I mean, something that used to be 50 years apart is occurring back to back to back, you see. And we're already seeing variable conditions. We're probably a planet of variation, and especially Canada, probably next to Venus, we have more temperature variations than anywhere. Well, they're just going to get more so with the changes of climate. Probably the best example of variability I can share with you is the Great Lakes. The Great Lakes, when I began my career, the Great Lakes were record high. Or record high levels, and then they became about 30 years. So about the 80s, 90s, and 2000 became for 30 years rather low levels, to say. So we had that but people thought you got used to it in 30 years. Oh well, it's the high levels and low levels. You want them stable, but you can maybe adjust over 30 years. What we've seen though is that we have gone from, in recent years, from 2014, I remember it well, the early part of that year, February 2014, the water levels in the Great Lakes, not so much Ontario, it's regulated, but Huron, Michigan, Georgian Bay, it's a unified lake, same water level. It had reached their lowest level on record in 100 years. And then within 20 months, it had reached their highest level, 1 meter higher. That happened like immediately. And that is something that's difficult to deal with. So what we're seeing now, ladies and gentlemen, we're not seeing is normal weather. And we plan everything based on normal weather. We build hospitals and schools, we make policies and strategies and decisions based on normal weather. You don't design, California style homes in Kingston. You design them and build them for your own situation. And what we're seeing is not normal weather anymore. We're seeing something far, far different. So let me give you a forecast. I always bring a forecast with me in the Great Lakes area. I think clearly, very simply, warmer, wetter, and wilder. I mean, take the warmest period you ever remember, and in 50 years, that will be the coldest. It will be, in fact, we in fact will see greater extremes, greater high temperatures, especially at night. That's the big concern. That's our worry. And then we're going to see fewer cold extremes, yes, but not zero. So, we might have in Kingston 60 days now that are all frost days now. Well, we might have 20 in the future. So, white Christmases might not be around. There won't be skating on backyard skating rinks or in the Rideau Canal in Ottawa. This is a very fundamental change to our life. And we'll see wetter conditions, 10% more wet now, but not enough to match the increased temperature. So we're going to see acute and chronic water problems. We might see, of course, less snow in the wintertime, less rain in the winter. In the summer. Flooding will be different. But with the warmer temperatures, that increase the precipitation of maybe 10% is not going to be enough. So we're going to see dry private wells and wetlands and depleted aquifers and things like this. Now, in terms of wilder weather, our models can't be too clear on this. We know that the conditions that produce wilder weather will be more prevalent. You get more lightning when you get warmer temperatures. Typically, a 3 to 5 degree warming will cause about 30% more lightning strikes. heavier doses of rain, as I described, when you warm it up. But also, don't think you're going to be Miami of the North. I mean, when you go from -8 degrees to -2, you're closer to that sweet zone of freezing rain. And we likely will see maybe a 40 to 60% increase of freezing rain because of temperatures that will mean it won't be snow, it may not be rain, but it'll be somewhere in between. And of course, that will have serious consequences, droughtier conditions, more pests, likely more diseases. Lyme disease. Physicians in Ontario are alarmed at the increase of Lyme. It used to be a problem at Rondo Park and Long Point, and now it's a problem from Manitoba to New Brunswick because the deer tick loves our winters. They can not only thrive, they can survive, they can thrive during those kind of conditions. So, okay, and as I say, more pests, diseases, these things that will be a challenge for us with a changing climate. It all won't be just warm up and nice, sunny kind of beach-like weather. There'll be implications for this change. Now, what is the future? What should we do about it? Well, I think just thinking about it and preaching about it is not going to make a difference. Signing an accord like a Kyoto Accord or a Paris Accord is not going to make any difference. I mean, I often think the cost of doing something is less than the cost of doing nothing. And, you know, we seem to be more worried and concerned. We fear more of the solutions than we do the impacts from these things. It's hard to understand why, but still many Canadians we're engaged. We feel concerned. We wonder what we should do about it, but we still think there is some time left to do something about it. It happens so slowly, climate change, that it's easy to ignore. Maybe we think the problem is too big for us. It seems impossible to fix. You know, I'm just a little guy with a backyard, you see. How can I affect the world situation? Or people think it's just natural, just the natural cycle. We'll get out of it. You know, many Canadians think that it's a remote problem. It's about skinny polar bears. Or drown Tahiti Islands or something like that. There's no Pearl Harbor moment. Nobody's dying from the big melt. It's like a tremor, not an earthquake, do you see? It's not top of mind, in your face. These are impediments to doing something about it, you see. Further, we've never had to face anything like this before. You know, we know how to handle terrorism and unemployment and oil spills in the Gulf of Mexico and even to some degree, the pandemic. But climate change is a new wrinkle. We don't have that familiarity with it, that psychological, historical connection to it. There's no tools in the toolbox that we think that can help us solve this. It's a global issue, you say. And, you know, sometimes we believe that we'll innovate our way out of it. That's the human kind of thinking. Oh, we'll just apply science, technology, engineering to it and fix it. Well, you know, that's hopeful. I mean, that has worked for certain problems, but it's risky. It may just not work for us. And I think that we're also seeing fatigue, climate change fatigue. A lot of fear and gloom and despair and hopelessness. We don't give people hope, you see. And I'm guilty of that. I accept responsibility to some degree. Sermon of hopelessness, doom and gloom, the apocalyptic end of the world. I mean, if you freeze the pants off people, they're gonna freeze. They're gonna, you know, be scared. You know, they're not necessarily going to do something. So I think we need to give more positive messages to get people to do something that's different and feel good about it, and even those small things are contributing to a big way. So what should we do about it? Well, I think we clearly have to cut back on our fossil fuels, decarbonize, slow it down to cut back on that. I mean, basically, we need to get going on it. We need to cut our carbon pollution 45% by the year 2030 and 100% by 2050. And every country and every sector has to get involved. You know, I'm not hopeful. I think we've lost 25 years of missed goals and broken promises and going nowhere. We go to these conferences, sign documents, pat each other on the back and say, hey, we solved it. Well, signing Kyoto didn't do anything. You see, signing a piece of paper. We need to do what Kingston has done, is put actions to words, you say. And so I think locally, I'm sometimes encouraged. I see what Kingston has done. I think if I read it right, 21% of greenhouse gases have reductions since the year 2011, just by retrofitting or changing facilities in city facilities. And your target of carbon neutrality by 2040, it seems a challenge, seems tough, but I understand it looks doable based on what you're doing. So I think we have to get on with it. I mean, I really, even during the pandemic, I didn't see a lot of hope. I mean, we did cut back on carbon emissions, maybe globally by 8%, but the reservoir of CO2 in that atmospheric reservoir is still increased. I mean, we're not scrubbing that out, you see, we're stuck with that. We've already baked the changes in the future into the system. And that's why resiliency is so important. That's why you have to get serious about it and move on to things like adaptation. Our response to weather disasters have always been to respond, not to anticipate. Somehow, the human condition is we'd rather spend billions of dollars in cleaning up than spending millions of dollars in preventing the disaster in the first place, you say. I mean, a better plan would be to reduce the risk before it happens. You're not going to stop it from raining, but you can reduce the risk from flooding by proper planning and resilience. You know, we have a choice, you say. We can cross our fingers and hope that, you know, that 100-year storm that occurred last year won't be around for 99 more years. We can do what the current policy is just to, you know, chalk it up as the cost of doing business, bail and bag, restore people to normalcy, bury the dead, and get on and wait for the next flood. Or we can try and prevent the flooding by resiliency and adaptation. And, you know, everybody has to get involved. This is a team effort. I mean, I think the primary responsibility is going to fall to individuals like us, to homeowners, to neighborhoods, to municipalities. You can't expect the federal government and the provincial government to bail you out every time Mother Nature misbehaves. And people need to start thinking about this issue automatically, not just as being a good doobie doing something, but to really get on with it. It's like fastening your seatbelt. I mean, you don't think of getting a head-on collision when you fasten your seatbelt, you do it. Or put on a bicycle helmet when you go cycling, you see. We have to get on with that. And you know that there's much the average homeowner can do to build resiliency. The old-fashioned rain barrel is a good example, or sump pumps, or backwater valves, or better landscaping in the community, and not focus on European cabinetry or gold faucets, but think about the things that will weatherproof your property and your home. You know, the insurance industry of Canada has said that 3/4 of the potential flooding risk can be reduced by just doing these little things around the home. A visit to Home Depot 2 or 3 weekends in a row can do so much to weatherproof our communities. And of course, I think the municipalities have to do something. I talk to a lot of mayors and councillors, and you know, some of them are of the opinion that, well, you know, we had that storm 2 years ago. That was the 100-year storm. We're okay for 99 years. Come on. I mean, that doesn't work, you say. Or they think, I can't afford it. I can't build a dome over my city or seawalls. It's not that. Sometimes it doesn't even take an economic output to do that. It's based on some of the tools that you have: tax incentives, land use planning, floodplain mapping, zoning, bylaws, moving people out of vulnerable areas to somewhere else. You see, planting trees, and the right trees, you know, those shaded trees, you say. So I think by increasing this, you know, resiliency, by redesigning our infrastructure in a way, cities can be more attractive places to live and work. I mean, those cities that begin to cope with the shock and the stress of climate change are more attractive both for residents, for potential residents and businesses and development, you say. And I think the model in Kingston is a good example to export to other cities, and that they can improve their lot by resiliency and adaptation. I think we need to, of course, I think always I'm in favor of nature solutions for this. I'll say something about that just as I wind up. I think simply just having cities say, well, we're not going to build where there's a risk. Doesn't take any money to say that. Maybe a loss of tax revenue later on, but it really saves your bacon when you do that. Buying out vulnerable property and relocating people. Turning something into a floodplain that could be a soccer pitch at the same time, you say. We must change the way we build things, to inspect, to strengthen our building codes. You know, to inspect them is important. You know, this structure was built 50 years ago to a climate much different than ours. Is that structure still weatherproof? Is it still worthy? We need to check that out. Build back quality is what I hear a lot. Allow people to build something back to better than it was when they're hit. Use that advantage of being hit, but building back something that's stronger and safer and more weatherproof to what you had. Makes so much more sense to me. I think too, I'm just gonna go a little faster now to end. I think I've run out of time. The one thing I want to emphasize too is nature-based solution. Leaving natural areas natural makes a lot of sense. Maintaining and restoring, preserving and protecting nature's green infrastructure. What we've learned so much about these extremes is that the best way of protecting us from the ravages of climate and extreme weather is restoring nature's green infrastructure. Let it protect itself, ourselves from itself. It's sort of nature's buffer zones. And you know, I think gardeners, I'm always pleased to talk to gardeners. They are doing something about climate change. Those front yards and backyards, the preservation of our community gardens, there's more green space in backyards and front yards than any other city-owned green space, you say. And it's beautiful to look at. It's comforting, but it's also environmentally restoring for us. And properly building planting the right trees, wildflowers in roadsides or in boulevards, I mean, makes so much more sense. Encouraging, you know, I showed a picture of the beautiful farmers market in Kingston, one of the best in Ontario, and encouraging, you know, small scale urban farms and local farm markets and planting edible trees and on urban landscapes is just absolutely the way to go. So in conclusion, let me say, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll move to my my sunset shot here, is that as the mayor said right at the top, he almost knew what I was going to say, is that really climate change is, he said, the defining issue of our time. I think he's absolutely right. It is certainly a defining challenge of our time. You know, climate change is real, it's serious. It's not fake news. It's not a murky forecast fantasy or a hypothetical kind of situation. It's not just a future threat, it's the here and now. It's not about skinny polar bears, it's about human health and survival. And at no time, and I'll say this because I was there, at no time since the 1980s have scientists backed down from their prediction for human civilization. Climate has behaved exactly as researchers had predicted. Almost everything. Oh, it's true, we didn't get the rising sea levels. We underestimated. We didn't see the ice caps melting in Greenland and Antarctica, but the runaway kind of melting has caused the lake or the sea levels to be higher. So, hey, we could have done better there. But the science is solid and strong. The trends are indisputable about what we're headed to. Yet there's uncertainty. There always will be. But you've got to act in the face of uncertainty. Just because we don't know everything about climate change doesn't mean we should ignore what we do. So our motivation for doing something about climate change is based not on what we've seen, but what we're going to see. And I think this is a fight not against climate change, but a fight really to show us how we can live better with the weather we've got and the weather we're going to get. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, David. What a wonderful presentation, thought-provoking, facts, and your knowledge is very, very, I took it all in. Thank you. We're a little short on time, so we're just going to ask one question at this point, and any additional questions, please email info@Sustainable Kingston to follow up, and hopefully, David, we could send those. But the one question we do have for you, David, as climate-related incidents become more and more common occurrences in the future, how do you feel, this is a two-part question, how do you feel insurers will adapt, knowing the risk reward and their business cases, specifically, do you think we will see the entire communities, say either seas or lakes, becoming excluded from flood insurance, for example?
Well, I think that certainly what we have seen, the insurance industry is very concerned about this growing threat of climate change. In fact, I really credit the insurance sector, the insurance industry, for raising awareness globally of this very serious issue of climate change. I mean, scientists were talking about this, but nobody believed scientists. They thought they were feathering their own bed or for their own agenda. And when it really hit the bottom line for insurance people, they're in many ways they're like climatologists. They've got huge data. They talk about risk and they try to spread the kind of the hazard around, you say. But they really saw that they were going bankrupt and they could not fund what they were doing. They said, well, there's only one way of doing it, is either to raise premiums, and of course then that would cut out people from buying insurance, or they could deny insurance. We won't cover that, which is another sort of application or adjustment that they would make to that. I mean, I would say that there are probably certainly some areas that are much more vulnerable than other areas. I think flooding is a good example. We have more floods cost more issues for insurance than any other economic or weather-related problem or hazard. I would see that insurers will deny insurers if people build in floodplains and or do the wrong thing. They will also reward people. They might very well reduce premiums when people have weatherproof their homes and communities. I think there's an advantage from that. So it works both ways from the insurance industry. In terms of areas becoming absolutely devoid of any possible insurers, well, I think there's always somebody willing to pay for it. I think the premium would be so high that it wouldn't be economically viable.
Great response. Thank you so much, David. On behalf of Sustainable Kingston, the City of Kingston, and our entire audience, I want to thank you so much for your time today. Very thought-provoking. We have a number of people thanking you and saying wonderful things. So we'll relay all of those wonderful things that they've said about you. It is 10:03 right now. We are going to take a quick 2-minute body break. We will be back at, we'll be back at 10:06. We'll take a 2-minute body break. So 10:06, we will be back. Thanks, everybody. Well, that was a quick wellness break. It is 10:06. Maybe we'll give an additional maybe 20 seconds for folks to just get settled, come back and sit down, and we will get started with our next group of presenters. Okay, so just a quick reminder of housekeeping. Please use the Q&A function in Zoom and not the chat function. I want to welcome folks that might have just joined, might be on YouTube. I was almost going to say the YouTube and age myself. But I welcome everyone back, and we're excited for the next group of presenters. All right, so it's my pleasure to introduce Henrique Benites. Henrique has been engaging with the architectural science and sustainability in the built environment for over 15 years. Currently, as an academic and PhD candidate at the University of New South Wales in Sydney, Australia, he investigates regenerative and circular approaches for cities and buildings. He is an Ellen MacArthur Foundation Circular Economy pioneer, founder of the Urba Clico project, which I'm sure he'll correct me if I pronounce that wrong, and engages in different initiatives of urban sustainability and climate change. In addition to his background to architecture, he is urbanism. He holds a master's degree in bioclimatic architecture and a postgraduate degree in urban engineering. Throughout his career, he's contributed to the sustainability of buildings and planning community projects. Among them, he has coordinated Aqua HQE certifications and the first lead new development in Latin America for the Rio 2016 Athletes Village in Brazil. Welcome, Henrique.
Yeah, thank you, Brooke. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear. You're great. Sounds great. Okay,
thank you. Hello, everyone. I'd like to start thanking the organizer, the sponsors, and the you who are watching us today. Well, the session I'm bringing you today is the result of my research and reflections developed in the past few years, and they are part of what I have called the Urba Ciclo project, which means cycle of the city in Esperanto. And through Urba Ciclo, I seek to understand how to regenerate the flows of energy and resources in the city towards a more circular thinking and a truly sustainable, generous, and climate-friendly urban movement. Well, we all know that 2020 was a truly difficult year for the whole planet. And unfortunately, we have also many other issues that we cannot ignore. Many countries, we have to deal with the massive recession, increasing inequality, and we are also, please come back, sorry. And we're also reaching the tipping point of climate change. And each year we keep breaking records. We're also entering the 6th major extinction event with increasing levels of biodiversity loss. When you look at cities, they occupy no more than 3% of the planet's surface, but are home to half of the planet's population and responsible for 70% of the global carbon emissions, and also 50% of resource use. Actually, in fact, a recent study pointed out that all the mass of human-made things is larger than the living biomass that we have in the planet. And while there has been some efforts and improvements in the past decades, they have not been enough for us to fully reverse our impacts. Now, COVID has shown us that we're really able to unite forces towards a common goal, and we are able to leverage the same power to regenerate the planet and move forward to a better future. We need to shift this mindsets and actions that we have today. Each of us individuals, we need to do our own part, But we cannot forget that most of the decisions are taken by governments and large corporations, and we need to demand that they also do their share to bounce forward and build back better, because they're not doing enough. Let me rephrase the ideas of biologist Janet Benites. What if our cities and buildings could be generous to the planet and humanity? What if our buildings were self-sufficient and could purify the air, attract bird life, control microclimate without use of air conditioning? Cities truly made for all citizens. It's based on these ideas that I've been working on my regenerative circularity model by seeking positive impacts at the local and global scales through holistic and life cycle thinking that adopts life cycle circles and just use resources. Technical solutions that are inspired by nature, regeneration of ecosystems and human relations, and inclusive, equitable, and safe urban spaces based on local context and people's needs. But in this process of changing our mindset, it's natural to navigate through different levels of action, and each step is extremely important for the next one. However, despite improvement in the past decades, our so-called green and sustainable practices are still focused on just reducing impacts rather than eliminating them. They're just less bad, and mitigation is not enough. We need a holistic and positive vision in which we see ourselves as an integral part of nature and that regenerates our global systems. We also need to move away from this thing that we call a linear economy society that extracts, produces, uses, and then throws away. As a response to it, we've been trying to implement what we call recycling economy, in which we mostly downcycle, just part of our waste. It loses value, it loses quality, and is still generating a lot of waste. We've been wrongly focusing on the symptoms rather than on the causes, that is overconsumption. So only truly circular economy is able to replicate the cycles of nature in which everything is food for something else, in which technical materials such as metals and glass are redesigned for many cycles of use without losing value, and biological materials as wood and timber, after many possible high-value cycles, will regenerate ecosystems. Cities with circular cycles will naturally exert less pressure into ecosystems with less use of resources, reduced environmental impacts, and reduced carbon emissions. It has actually been estimated by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation that a circular economy can reduce up to 45% of all global emissions related to the production of goods. But how do we transform these ideas into real-life actions? To regenerate natural cycles, we need to return biomaterials to nature. So in addition to the well-known timber and bamboo, there's an increasing number of options. For example, we may replace animal or plastic leather using similar material that is produced from pineapple plant fibers. The material at the end of its possible cycles can simply return to the ecosystem as a nutrient for the soil, where new pineapples will be produced, or it can also be used for the generation of biogas, which can feed the same production process. And there are many similar materials being developed from mycelium, latex, wine waste, and many others. Now, to have a positive impact, we need to give back more than we take. And we can do this by having a building in city that generates more energy than it actually needs, and is injected into the urban grid, that use the bio-based structure from sustainable sources of timber that will compensate the carbon emitted during the production process, that helps regulate the microclimate instead of adding up to the urban heat island, that absorbs air pollutant and helps purify the air, that treats its water with plants without releasing any harmful chemicals into nature, and that creates habitats for birds, insects, and other animals. Now, what if we think of products as service instead of ownership? Do we really need all the tools and equipment that we have at home? Do we even need to own cars full time? How about sharing? Why not lend or rent just in those moments of real need? This is the case with the well-known car or bike sharing services. And there's an increasing number of library of things or library of tools that are popping up everywhere. But to really make it work, we have to redesign the system, our products, buildings, and cities. We have to design for the future, because cities are dynamic spaces whose changes occur gradually over time in incremental stages, which demand a life cycle thinking. And this means designing buildings and products so that components are standardized and may be used in different products and companies, easy to assemble and disassemble by anyone as many times as needed, flexible to allow adaptations and when users' needs change, have an extended lifetime and facilitated repairs instead of that planned obsolescence that we see so broadly today, and with as many different cycles of use as possible. Another underpinning concept to this idea is collaboration and cooperation. It's only in this way that we will ensure that the waste from one company, from one process, will become the resource for another, such as bread leftovers from a bakery, for example, becoming the beer in a brewery, or sharing an energy generation plant. There's an amazing project, a whole industrial district in Denmark called Kalundborg, and it's based on this so-called industrial symbiosis. So they have all these industries in the same place, and they share the infrastructure, for example, for treating water or waste. They also share services, else they share the same water from one process to another industry, the energy and the materials, as I said, from one resource, leaving one resource to enter the other one. Finally, learning from nature may be the most important lesson in this journey, and David has pointed out that very well. So an example would be substituting or complementing our traditional hard or gray infrastructure in cities that is usually monofunctional, expensive, and does not prevent diffusive pollution and enhances urban heating, with green infrastructure that is polyfunctional, flexible, resilient, and beautiful. And they can provide us with a series of benefits that we normally call ecosystem services. They can provide, for example, cultural services, such as recreational use of parks or therapeutic effects of plants in hospital patients, regulating services that ensure the reduction of urban temperatures, carbon sequestration and storage, flood control, war, air purification, the provision of food, fresh water, and resources, and also basic supporting services such as soil formation and nutrient cycling. Now, there's an interesting project that shows in an amazing way how these ideas have been implemented, and it's the Bo01 district in Malmö, Sweden. So they created this urban planning instrument that they call the Green Space Factor. So this instrument, what it does, it requires that each lot that is being developed and built needs to achieve a certain score that is based on the types of an area of different green infrastructure elements, such as rain gardens and green roofs. So it's not just defining a minimum permeable area, it's more than that. In addition, each of these projects had to select and implement at least 10 environmental measures from a selected list of 35. And very interesting, many of these ideas are truly regenerative, truly connected to what we understand as a generative approach. So it includes boxes as habitats for birds and bats, biotopes for specific insects, rainwater collection for irrigation, on-site water for on-site grey water treatment and reuse, local composting of organic waste, the use of stormwater flows in surface landscape design, improving the quality of the external areas, at least 2 crop varieties of fruits and berries for every certain area, the availability of food for birds all year long, and areas that are left for natural succession, that is so that nature can naturally grow and regenerate in those areas, besides green roofs and other strategies. And the outcome in this district is a very sustainable area that fosters biodiversity, is more resilient to climate change, has a better control of stormwater, produces food, and creates opportunities and pleasant public spaces in which people can connect and engage. And I can say that from the various green neighborhoods that I have visited in different parts of the globe, this is certainly one of the most impressive that I have seen. And these were just a few examples of how we can implement a regenerative and circular approach, not only in our cities and buildings, but in any other city of our life. And I believe it has a huge potential for helping us create resilient cities that are climate and environmentally friendly, that will reconnect us with nature. Now, if you'd like to join in this journey to globally premiere this idea of regenerative circular cities, please ask yourself these two questions. What needs to be done to start a regenerative and circular revolution in your neighborhood or city? And what are you going to do to enable a large-scale regeneration? So my final message to all of you is that regenerating is not about a return to a nostalgic past, but it's rather about creating a new and generous future in which, in symbiosis with nature, we create value for the whole planet and all people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Henrique, for that thought-provoking and those questions. I'm going to be thinking about that, and also for drawing those interconnections. I say the word interconnections a lot, and I do this a lot with my hands when I'm on screen. So thank you very much for that. Again, I thank you on behalf of the City of Kingston and Sustainable Kingston for your time today.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Lori Nikkel. I'm going to hop right into it because I don't want to waste any time. Lori is a vocal and passionate champion of environmental and social justice issues related to food and is sought after for her expertise internationally. Lori advises on development of Ontario Foods and Organic Waste Framework and is a member of the management board at National Zero Waste Council. A leadership initiative that brings together governments, business, and organizations to advance waste prevention in Canada. As a CEO for Second Harvest, Canada's largest food rescue organization, she ensures that thousands of tons of nutrient-dense surplus food is diverted to social service agencies every year. Her current projects include the Avoidable Crisis of Food Waste, the world's first evidence-based research project that identifies where, why, and how much food is lost and wasted across the supply chain, and the expansion of the foodrescue.ca online tool that allows food businesses to donate surplus food to social service agencies, schools, and food banks in their community. I'm so excited. Lori, take it away.
Thanks so much, Brooke. That was great and quite a mouthful. You did wonderful. Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for allowing me to join you and add my voice and Second Harvest voice to the climate change conversations happening today. Like Kingston's vision to become Canada's most sustainable city is laudable, and we have such great respect for all you're doing and the initiatives you put in place so far. So today, I'm going to talk to you about Second Harvest and our vision to prevent and divert food loss and waste before it goes into a landfill, where it creates methane gas, in an effort to address the detrimental impact it has on our planet. And I'll end with an invitation to a big party. Right now, I think all of us should pat ourselves on the back because we all deserve a party for getting through 2020. But first, I like to talk about money, because money, as the saying goes, makes the world go round. And it is our strong belief that at this party, we have to include everyone, not just those of us who believe we are directly connected to the issues, because everybody is. They just might not know their place yet. So this chart, sourced from a recent Royal Bank study, shows that even during a pandemic, when everyone's values are shifting, responsible investing, sometimes known as environmental, social, and governance investing, is actually stronger than ever in Canada. 77% of investors are interested in responsible investing. Now, I can't claim to be a finance expert at Second Harvest, but I think those are really good numbers because it really means that protecting the environment is becoming more important to the public at large. And it's evidenced by investment portfolio priorities. And it means that our goals to reduce food loss and waste is a story people will be open to hearing. So now we know that we are becoming more aware of living our values and supporting the environment with our investments is one way everyone can participate. We also know that historically, money drives attention away from social and environmental interests. And that once we are all on the same page, at the same party, things start to change for the good. We, as you can tell, are a positive bunch here at Second Harvest because we've seen what can happen when we collaborate and organize and mobilize. Second Harvest is one of the first organizations in Canada to recognize that neglecting families in need of food in our cities, in our towns, while so much food is being discarded, makes absolutely no sense. We were founded in Toronto in 1985 by Ina and Joan. They started a small nonprofit by picking up fresh, delicious food that was destined for garbage from just 7 grocery stores and restaurants and put it in their hatchbacks. They distributed this found food across the city to charities and nonprofits supporting people in need. It was so simple. 2 women, a vision, a couple of hatchbacks. This is the boldness that fuels us at Second Harvest each and every day. Because unfortunately, the problems of food insecurity and food waste have not gone away. And today, we're rescuing and redistributing food to over 4,300 food programs across this country. These are charities and nonprofits who serve this beautiful, fresh, nutritious food to people in their communities. So the shocking stat is, today, 58% of all the food produced for Canadians, 58% is lost or wasted. That's enough food to feed every Canadian for 5 months. So we define food loss and waste the following ways. Food loss occurs during the production, transport, storage, packaging, process, manufacturing, wholesaling, and distribution of food. So it's really further up the supply chain. Food waste occurs during the retail stocking and selling phase. So at restaurants, food service, and through your home. But we're treating our valuable environment as a commodity when it comes to food production and consumption. Like as evidenced here by milk every year just being dumped. And this has to stop. This is one example. This is happening in every commodity. So I'm delighted because the war on climate change is a powerful and social platform. And more of us are thinking twice about single-use plastics, agriculture waste, and preserving our planet's water. So I'm here to tell you how food waste impacts our environment and to ask you to join the food rescue revolution. It's fun. We're going to save the world. So last year alone, Second Harvest rescued and redistributed over 22 million pounds of healthy food in Canada. That's equivalent to about 22 million healthy meals. But before we celebrate, it's important to know that 5 million Canadians have insufficient access to the food they need to be healthy. That's kids who go to school that don't have breakfast clubs or lunch clubs, adults in lines at food banks. It's why families are forced to eat fast and cheap processed food, full of fats and salts, just because it's cheaper. And it's why seniors often have to make that tough decision of buying the medication they need or the food they need. We produce enough food in this country to feed 52 million people. Our population is 37, and yet over 5 million of us are food insecure. So this is the first part of the food waste equation that really doesn't make sense. we need to do better. The increased need for food in our communities has kept Second Harvest in brisk business. At the same time, the damage to our environment from food that is lost before it even hits a grocery store has intersected with our mission to feed. And this has caused us to take a hard look at what we could be doing further up the supply chain, literally, to mitigate the damage caused by growing, producing, packaging, and delivering food that is ultimately destined for landfill. Why on earth would we call this food waste? It is an all too vivid reminder of our continued negligence as a society to respect our land and resources and the nourishment that comes from it. Earth's abundance is finite. In those same 12 months that we rescued 22 million pounds of food, we diverted 75 million pounds of greenhouse gases from preventing that food from hitting landfill. This is the equivalent of the carbon sequestered by over 500,000 trees. And by ensuring we got that great food to people, we prevented over 15 billion liters of water from being wasted. That's the amount of water it would take to fill 6,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools. The avoidable food loss and waste in Canada alone equates to 22 million tons of CO2 equivalents. To put that in perspective, that's the equivalent of all the cars in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta driven for a year. Almost 5 million cars. And here's another thing we're doing to achieve national waste reduction and hunger relief. To rescue even more food. Foodrescue.ca. This is our mobile app, and it's a national service for food rescue and redistribution. It is a curator and coordinator for food rescue that leverages technology to knit people with food together with people who need food. Up until a few years ago, food rescue alone kept us busy. However, we realized as a legacy food rescue organization with a national impact and an international reputation, we needed to raise our voices and do more than just divert food loss and waste from the landfills. We needed to use our platform to draw attention and provide solutions to preventing food loss and waste in the first place. Through our research, The Avoidable Crisis of Food Waste, we've used a tomato to illustrate the pain points where loss and waste occur. It's an ideal example of a product that makes its way to retail as both a tomato and as a processed good. And in our roadmap, we follow that tomato's path through the food supply chain. And we conclude by envisioning how we can all work towards long-term change that will generate environmental, social, and economic improvements. Outcomes with a triple bottom line. And I strongly recommend everyone read this. There's a roadmap and there's a technical report. The roadmap is a lot easier to read. It's my favorite. So if you're interested, you can find it at Second Harvest. So what you may not know is agriculture accounts for 26% of the total GHGs. So why on earth would we harm the environment and then not eat the food? We leave it to rot and create even more damage through the methane it creates in landfill. So here's a couple of sobering facts. Lettuce takes 25 years to decompose in landfill. Producing just one orange requires over 52 liters of water. If you think that food loss and waste is not big business in Canada, consider this. $49 billion per year is the value of food that is sacrificed in the production process, deemed not perfect, spoiled during production, damaged during distribution, stale dated in a warehouse, and discarded into landfills. $50 billion is the value of mortgages that the Canadian government purchased as a response to the COVID pandemic to bolster debt-strapped Canadians. However, we do see change on the horizon. Here's a slide of the Canadian assets dedicated to responsible investing. That's $3.2 trillion in assets, a significant increase over the last 2 years. And this might explain the growing interest behind investing in environmental, social, and governance-based businesses. Or it could just be a new generation that values the environment and would like the land as we know it to be here for a very, very long time. So Second Harvest is a small part, but as we all know, small parts combine to make large movements. And if we all keep talking and sharing and inviting everyone to come to this party, incredible things can and will happen. So here's what we're doing. We're continuing to generate and rescue more and more food through our national network, through our foodrescue.ca platform, and through our fleet and warehouse. We are fielding research to better understand the where, why, and how food loss and waste occurs across the supply chain in Canada, and developing strategies to prevent and divert as much as possible. We're providing education and certification to our partner agencies so that they can meet high standards for food recovery. And we are nurturing the thousands of Canadians across every province and territory by redistributing unsold food for free to charities and nonprofits and Indigenous communities. And I said thousands, but last year alone it was over 1 million. We're also advocating for a sustainable future where the public and our constituents understand and respect how food comes to our tables and how we can start making some positive decisions to prevent food loss and waste. So join the party by becoming a member of our community. We are fun. Tell one person you know that food loss plays a role in climate change, and then direct them to our website. Email me, there's my address, tell me what you thought of today's presentation, or follow us on any of our social channels. You can also consider making a financial donation to help us, because we're a charity. And we rely on people like you to keep the trucks and technology rolling. So that's it for me today. I thank you for your attention, and I thank you for your actions. All the actions you take after this event to get to know Second Harvest better and to include food loss and waste in your climate solutions. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Lori. That was wonderful. And I'm in. I'm in.
Yay!
Yay! All right. So again, on behalf of Sustainable Kingston and the City of Kingston, thank you so much for your time and your presentation today and all of your amazing effort that you do every single day of your life. So I appreciate you. Our next presenter is Julie Salter-Keane. Julie Salter-Keane is the manager of the City of Kingston's Climate Leadership Division and works with staff to implement and realize the City of Kingston's vision to demonstrate leadership on climate action. She also represents the City on Sustainable Kingston's Board of Directors. Julie is a highly motivated individual, passionate about the future of our community. In the past, Julie operated her own planning consulting firm before becoming the Director of Planning and Development at the Township of Leeds and the Thousand Islands. In 2010, she accepted a management position at the City of Kingston, where her abilities to foster relationships and identify opportunities for collaboration have led to the realization of many community projects like Portsmouth Olympic Harbor and Kingston Penitentiary Revisioning Project, and the City of Kingston's Accessibility Plan. I would like to welcome Julie to make her presentation.
Thank you, Brooke, for the introduction. And good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today and to join the other speakers at the annual Climate Change Symposium. I'm here today to talk about how the City of Kingston is tackling climate action and our city's plans for the future. Here in Kingston, as we continue to support our residents through the pandemic, we have also have our eyes on the future, about how we come back better and stronger than ever. There's no question that the pandemic has been a big challenge for all of us, but through it, we've embraced the power of collaboration and about embracing approaches based on science and evidence. That's the foundation by which we can build back better, more resilient, and more sustainable than ever before. So today I'm going to highlight some ways that the City of Kingston is taking action on climate. City Council declared a climate emergency in 2019 and has made demonstrating leadership in climate action as one of the 5 strategic priorities. The strategic priority to demonstrate leadership in climate action includes actions that reduce our corporate carbon footprint from municipal operations, improve resilience to extreme weather and changing climate conditions, and enable and support similar actions within the community. Today, I'm going to tell you about how we're supporting residents to reduce their carbon footprints, the role infrastructure plays, and how policy and planning will get us to where we need to be. When it comes to climate action, you need bold vision, but then you need the right policies and programs that residents can get behind so they can all work together toward one common goal of climate action. At the city, that means all staff working together and see the work that they do through the lens of sustainability and climate leadership. These projects, among others throughout the corporation of the city, work towards achieving Council's goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the city's operations and in the community by 15% by 2022. So here are some programs that we're developing currently. First, we're developing a climate leadership plan for the city and community. This is a roadmap about how we're going to get to carbon neutrality by 2040. The city recognizes that collective community action is key to achieving meaningful climate action. The climate leadership plan will be informed by community input and provide strategic guidance on how to achieve these very ambitious targets. The development of the climate leadership plan includes extensive public engagement that began in 2020. Details on upcoming public engagement will be posted on the city's Get Involved platform, which I'll provide some information to at the end of the presentation. Goals of the climate leadership plan are to define a clear path to reach corporate and community carbon neutrality, engage the most influential stakeholders who can make the biggest GHG reductions, and identify climate risk and adaptation priorities. And finally, to consider solutions that stimulate economic development and prosperity. Next, we launched the Community Climate Action Fund so that residents can support local charities and nonprofit organizations in their climate actions. The Kingston Community Climate Action Fund helps charities and nonprofits reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. It is one way the city is demonstrating leadership on climate action and will help bring us closer to our goal of achieving carbon neutrality by 2040. Looking for a way to take real, local, and measurable climate action? Donate today to the Kingston Community Climate Action Fund and support Martha's Table, who wants your help to purchase an electric vehicle to increase its services, but not its carbon footprint. And Habitat for Humanity, who is seeking your support to install air source heat pumps in 4 new townhomes. Donations can be made at canadahelps.org and at Kingston Community Credit Union branches locations across the city. Next, we are completing multiple energy conservation measures across the city facilities to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and energy consumption. While energy conservation measures are implemented in existing facilities, new construction projects continue as the city broke ground on our first net zero energy building, the Regional Fire Training Center, and we're also working on completing the Kingston East Community Center, which will be near net zero energy. Right now, we're developing a home energy retrofit program to help residents make their homes more energy efficient and more affordable. This program is being developed to help residents reduce GHG emissions associated with household energy use. It can also lead to savings on home energy costs. Residential energy use accounts for 14% of the Kingston community 2018 GHG emissions, and residents collectively spend nearly $100 million annually on energy used within their homes. And secondly, Kingston is building climate leadership and developing a green standard community improvement plan to incentivize the construction of net zero buildings, which is aimed at stimulating construction of residential and commercial buildings that have highly efficient use of energy and water with minimal GHG emissions. Next, we have purchased electric buses, as you heard from the mayor this morning, and have invested in electric vehicle charging stations. We have 47 public EV chargers in service and operated by the city. And in addition to the city operated chargers, there is now an additional 37 chargers available for public use by multiple vehicle types. These additional chargers have been installed by private businesses, post-secondary schools, and other government buildings. Another great example of the partnerships with the common goal of taking action on climate. Kingston is working to double our tree canopy, and we're reinforcing our shorelines against flooding and storm surges, which are increasingly common. We are also working hard to divert up to 65% of our waste from landfill by the year 2025. Diverting waste from landfill is good for the land, air, water, and climate. Diverting waste also means capturing valuable resources out of the garbage sent to the landfill that can be reused, recycled, or composted. We have many partnerships that we're working with as we develop our climate leadership plan, in addition to our partnership with Sustainable Kingston. And do you own or manage a business or organization? Sustainable Kingston Sustainability.eco program provides an easy to understand process for going green and reducing your operations impact on climate change. Become a member today or visit Sustainable Kingston's site and see the other Kingston organizations that are already participating. Well, no matter what the city does to reduce our emissions, we can't reach our reduction targets without the help of citizens and businesses. Though climate change is a daunting global challenge, there are many things that we can do at the local level to help. There are many positive things already happening in our community, from participating in the annual Commuter Challenge to undertaking renewable energy projects. I encourage you to visit our city's website, Climate Change and Energy, for lots of great tips on how you can reduce your carbon footprint. And on this slide right now, you can see the websites that we have, as well as we have our Get Involved platform, where we have a number of our projects that I spoke to today that are there that you can follow along. You can receive updates as we move forward. And I'd like you to challenge yourself and your family at this time. Can you reduce your GHGs by 15%? Check out the infographic on the cityofkingston.ca Change for Climate website, which outlines the city's current climate actions, and plan to make your own changes to reduce climate changing GHGs. And finally, I'd like to thank you again for taking the time today to participate in the Climate Change Symposium. And I want to end my talk with this quote from Marian Wright Edelman, which I believe is so fitting for all of us as we continue to take action on climate. We must not, in trying to think about how we can make a big difference, ignore the small daily differences we can make, which over time add up to big differences that we often cannot foresee. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie. Thank you for your leadership every day, and thank you for the City of Kingston's leadership for our community. It's amazing to see this innovation and action happening here for our community to see and to hopefully make change as well, the change that they can be. At this time, we are going to take a wellness break. It is 10:50. We'll get ourselves back on track. We will take a 10-minute break and come back for 11 on the nose. So we'll see you back at 11 and where we will have Severn Cullis-Suzuki speak. And I'm looking very much forward to that. So we'll see you all soon. Well, hello, everyone. It is 11 a.m. And it's time to get started back. So welcome back. Welcome to folks who might have been joining us, who have joined after, and I haven't had a chance to welcome you. So welcome to everyone. I'll take this chance right now as well to remind folks they can, if they're using social media, you can hashtag and share the event with hashtag Climate Symposium 2021. I'm going to be introducing Kristen Mullins in a moment. But just to start, just one note. In Severn's talk that she's doing, there is weather that's happening where she is located. So if we do have any issues with her video was dropped while she's presenting, she will call in that case. So so just be patient, don't run away if any technical difficulties happen. All right, at this time, I will invite Kristen Mullins, Executive Director of Sustainable Kingston, to join us.
Thank you, Brooke. I just want to start out by thanking you all for joining us here today via both Zoom and the YouTube channels. Sustainable Kingston hosts events such as this throughout the year. So if you're enjoying the event today and you want to learn more about what we do, please visit sustainablekingston.com. Check out our events and workshops, our education programs for school-aged children, and sustainably.eco, our carbon reduction program for businesses. I'm very excited to introduce our next speaker, Severn Cullis-Suzuki. I was about 9 years old when I first heard her speak, and I still get chills to this day when I think back to that moment. So we're definitely in for a treat. So at just 12 years old, Severn Cullis-Suzuki gained international attention when she delivered her famous speech at the Rio Earth Summit, pleading for delegates to preserve the planet. Since then, Severn has continued to advocate for intergenerational justice for future generations, speaking to audiences around the world about the necessity of returning to our deepest human values and acting with the future in mind when it comes to environmental sustainability. As a teenager, Severn was appointed to the Earth Charter Commission to help produce a universal set of guidelines for human conduct with respect to the planet, which has gained traction in communities and countries all around the world. In 2000, Severn spearheaded Power Shift 2000, a cycling trip across Canada for clean air and climate change awareness, and the Recognition of Responsibility Pledge, which she brought to the World Summit on Sustainable Development in Johannesburg 2002. The presentation and the journey to making it was the subject of a documentary film that aired on CBC's The Nature of Things. 10 years later, Cullis-Suzuki returned to Rio once again for the UN 20 conference as a champion for the youth group We Canada. Cullis-Suzuki has published several books, including The Day You Will Change the World, and is one of the authors and editors of the book Notes from Canada's Young Activists. She is also an Action Canada Fellow and was a board member of the David Suzuki Foundation for 14 years, and a founding member of the Haida Gwaii Higher Education Society. Severn received a Bachelor of Science in Ecology and Evolutionary Biology from Yale University and a Master's of Science in Ethnoecology from the University of Victoria. She is currently a Vanier and public scholar pursuing her doctorate in endangered language revitalization. Please give a warm welcome to Severn Cullis-Suzuki.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Hi from Haida Gwaii. I'm very honored to be here today and to be part of this wonderful symposium. I feel so inspired and hopeful, and I think that the morning's events were really a wonderful mix of different perspectives. We heard from David Phillips, who outlined for us as a climatologist in no uncertain terms the facts, the facts about climate change, which is always important to come back to. And then we heard from Henrique, who told us about the circular economy and the amazing magic in biomimicry, this idea that if we copy nature, that's where so many of our solutions lie. Then we heard from Lori at Second Harvest, who really showed us with her attitude towards a problem, which is food waste as well as food insecurity, that we can find solutions using innovation and thinking about things differently. And then to hear Julie and the City of Kingston showing us what steps the City of Kingston is undergoing to address this climate emergency was totally inspiring. We need that support from our leaders, from our municipal governments, to actually help us make systematic change. So I'm just feeling very, very inspired, very hopeful. And so now my talk, I'm going to be with you for the next hour. I'm going to be kind of building on what we've talked about this morning. And my perspective right now, and you're catching me at the beginning of the year in the midst of a pandemic, as well as the decline of the American Empire. My attitude in this moment is, one of reflection and starting to really think about this innovation that we need to really start thinking about, and this attitude that we need to take to our crises and problems, and how we can really learn from these crises and challenges and use them in order to move forward as our ancestors always did. So I want to start by first acknowledging where I am. I'm speaking to you today from the village of Skidegate on Haida Gwaii, home of the Haida Nation. I have a slideshow that's going, so you can see a picture of a recent pole raising that happened. The Haida Nation have lived here from time immemorial, and archaeologists have found evidence that this means some 13,800 years. And I love this photo because it really captures how the Haida are today, and I think have always been. We have Christian White and his team of carvers who are blessing the pole, or they're dancing around the pole to honor it and to scare away negative spirits. And this is a practice that has been done for millennia. And then you have in the foreground, you have these Haida witnesses who are wearing cedar hats and also recording this important event with their cell phones, simultaneously traditional and modern humans. And that's definitely how the Haida are, and how so many Indigenous people around the planet are today. So we are not physically together during this conference, but I'd like everyone to just take a moment to consider wherever you are, the Indigenous peoples whose territories you are on. Who are they? Where are they today? It's been an incredible sea change that we witnessed, seeing how land acknowledgements have really become standard protocol at public events. And I think that this is us newcomers finally stepping into the protocols of the lands where we live. And if you don't know who your hosts are, the Indigenous people of the land where you live today, this is a great time to find out. Today, we settlers and immigrants are benefiting from the good stewardship of Indigenous people of their lands for millennia. I'm honored to be speaking to you at this particular moment in time. Here we are in the Northern Hemisphere after coming through the darkest time of the year, having come through a year unlike any other. And now we are looking forward. Now we are starting to think about life post-pandemic. And we're starting to come back to our responsibilities and to build back better. And I want to once again appreciate Sustainable Kingston and the City of Kingston for positioning this gathering at this time and focusing on looking to heal our atmosphere and our cities, as well as ourselves. Haida Gwaii is an archipelago, an island archipelago, 100 kilometers off the coast. And man, have we ever been experiencing the effects of climate change this week. We've had about 7 back-to-back storms in the past 10 or so days. It seems like it's always storming. It just started about an hour ago again, hence the risk of power outage once again, but hopefully we'll be fine. But this is not normal. While we're used to storms, having them so frequent without any breaks in between, this is totally not normal. We also are experiencing double the precipitation that we usually receive. And because the soils are totally saturated, we're seeing a lot more trees coming down. So islanders are really used to winter storms, but this is really disconcerting because this is a new pattern, much in the same line as what David Phillips was talking about. So I want to just, tell you where I'm coming from. David Phillips mention in his talk his disappointment at the national level actions that, and I agree, you know, internationally, we've seen all these international agreements, not only the Kyoto Accord, but also the Paris Accord, where all of the countries of the world essentially have agreed that we have to stop more climate warming. And yet the action at that level is absolutely atrocious. It is at the cities, it is at the municipal level, it is at the community level that we are seeing leadership, that we actually have hope. And so this is why, you know, I think that events like this, where you have cities, where you have people who are dealing with the human scale of governance, who are taking this on and having these symposia and engaging in dialogue, it's just absolutely essential. So I want to commend all of you for the work that you're putting to our greatest challenge, that of climate change. Okay. And this is a special moment for me personally to have the opportunity to reflect on my thoughts about climate change. I've been an activist for environmental and social justice my whole life. And for the past 14 years, I've lived here on Haida Gwaii, learning from Haida elders and living off the ocean for our food, for all of our protein. And my husband, Gutautas, and I have been committed to raising our children in a Haida way. But even here, as I said, climate change is all too clear. So this summer in August, my husband, children, and I will be moving to the city of Vancouver so that I can put my energies towards sustainability as executive director of the David Suzuki Foundation. So this is a pretty big shift in my life, but the cause calls for all hands on deck, and the science is telling us that as a species, we have 9 years to bring our carbon output down to half of what it is today. And then we'll have a chance at hitting our ultimate goal, which is getting to zero emissions by 2050. And I was so heartened to see that the City of Kingston has set a target of zero emissions by 2040. It's just, you know, that's the leadership that we need in order to make our goals. So I'm all in. Today, I'll share a little of my story and how I came to be on the soapbox, speaking out about the environment. And then I want to talk about the teachings that the pandemic offers us today. I've spent so much of my life wondering and thinking about what it would take to get all of us humans on the same page to allow us to really transform to a sustainable way of human globalized society. And now here we are in 2021, suddenly in a shared experience that all humanity is having together at once. We're all in isolation, yet we are experiencing something simultaneously together. This is shared by all countries, by all races, by all beliefs, all political positions. And while the different classes are having very different experiences facing these challenges, everyone is experiencing a drastic change from what they are used to. We are all vulnerable in the face of this pandemic. So we have to learn from this experience. As with any crisis, problem, challenge, there are deep teachings, but they are only there if we choose to see them. So this is how I'm thinking now. I'm going to talk about what we can learn from COVID-19, what we already have learned from COVID-19, because I believe that the deep teachings inherent in what we are going through right now just might make it possible for us as an entire society to appropriately address climate change and meet our goals. So first, let me tell you a little bit about myself and my story. I've been concerned about the environment my whole life. Growing up in Vancouver in BC, I was very lucky to spend a lot of the time on the beach and camping with my family. In the 1980s, my parents became very involved with the environment. This was because my dad, David Suzuki, who was and still is host of The Nature of Things, was learning a lot from the show, and especially from Indigenous peoples who were defending their land from logging, from mining, from burning. And it was through watching them being land defenders, essentially, is what we say today, they became environmentalists. So as a child, I learned about environmental problems. Okay, next slide, please. And in fact, we met the Haida when my parents got involved in their epic fight for South Moresby in 1985. And here, my little sister and I are at Skungwai at the southern tip of South Moresby. Today, it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And South Moresby became an incredible international struggle representing Indigenous people fighting to save one of the last old growth ecosystems in BC. And it's known as an incredible success today. And now South Moresby is known as the Guayhanas National Park Reserve. My parents met people who welcomed us and quickly became family. So you might have heard of my dad before, but you probably haven't heard of the powerhouse of the family, which is Dr. Tara Cullis. My mom, she is this smiling lady here at this Jaw potlatch. She is the calm voice while Dad is sounding the alarm. She takes action and has perspective. And Tara's attitude is, Dad's right, we're heading into ecological collapse. All right, let's get to work. Let's make a plan of action. And don't get too carried away. Every generation has its Black Plague, its Civil War, its Cold War, its World War. There have always been forces of good and bad, and there always will. So we have to work hard to keep the world in balance and work for good. That's Tara Cullis. Needless to say, it's Mom who is able to bring the David Suzuki Foundation into being. Tara is president and one of the co-founders of the DSF. And it was my mom who saw, when I was a child, she saw that I was very concerned about what was happening. And she encouraged me, she suggested to start organizing, to get together with a friend, to have a meeting with if school friends were interested, and see what people wanted to do, maybe form a club. And so she encouraged me to do this. And in grade 4, I got some friends together, and I also followed her directions. Mom said there were 2 rules of meetings. You have to take minutes, and you also have to have cookies. These are essential. These are the main goals or practices of meetings, and these are practices I still use today. So got together, started with my friends, we started ECHO, the Environmental Children's Organization. We educated ourselves about environmental issues, and we produced a series of newsletters for kids with help from the Environmental Youth Alliance, who were a group of youth environmentalists who were not a few blocks down from where I lived. And we fundraised for projects we learned about, the Penan of Sarawak, Indigenous people from Indonesia. We're traveling around the world and telling about their plight, logging in their rainforests. And so we fundraised to be able to buy a water filter for a group there, for a group of Penan people who had polluted water. We had beach cleanups. We learned a lot. We were learning, that was our primary goal. And after a few years, we heard about a big meeting that was going to be held by the United Nations in Rio de Janeiro. It was going to be the largest gathering of heads of state ever held. And it was going to address issues of environment and development. And it was said that this meeting would really set the stage for humans in the environment for the 21st century. And we thought, wow, they're going to have this big meeting, and there's going to be all these old men sitting around discussing our future. Who is going to be there to remind them of what is truly at stake? Well, maybe we should go. Yeah, great idea. And, I remember telling my dad about this idea, and he said, "You're crazy. There's going to be 30,000 people down there. It's going to be a gong show." But as children are, you know, they don't know how hard things are, and therefore the barriers don't exist. We were taken by this idea. We kept telling people about it, teachers, other parents, and lo and behold, people started making small donations to our cause. So once we got money in our hands, we thought, "Oh, okay, whoa, could this actually happen?" And that's when, once again, my mom stepped in and she helped us figure out a game plan. Okay, she said, "Okay, you want to raise some money? You got to make a plan. You got to have an event. You got to have fundraisers, and you got to make pitches for money. You got to make a speech." And so, to make a long story short, we were able to raise money from our community and send 5 of us to Rio. And here you can see Rafi, the children's singer, was a big supporter, also a neighbor who lived a block away. And he actually came down as a chaperone for us down when we actually made it to Rio. Okay, so we got there. Now what? We had registered at the Global Forum, and this is all before even email, if you can imagine. It's hard for me to imagine organizing without email or the internet. But you know, we used to do that. We'd registered at the Global Forum. This is where all the NGOs were. So we had a site, we had a place where we could put out our photocopied pamphlets that we made for why we felt it was important that world leaders thought about children and the future. And this booth is where we went every day, where people from around the world were milling about, talking to each other, learning from each other. And this is where we started getting our message out. Among us, we spoke 4 different languages, so we could speak to many different people. And we found that instead of ignoring us because we were young, instead people were very interested in why we were there. We were unusual. And we started getting invitations to come and speak at side events, 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there. And finally, after 2 weeks of hard work, we got a call from the UN. Someone had dropped out of the plenary session and we had been suggested to fill in. So we raced to the UN compound in a crazy Brazilian taxi, scribbling the speech in the back seat. And I had 5 minutes to give our speech. So you can still see that speech that 12-year-old gave so long ago on YouTube. It was filmed as all UN proceedings, and someone sent us the 5-minute video, and we sent it out upon request, first by VHS, then by DVD, and then finally someone uploaded it when the internet went public, and you can still see it. So what did I tell them? ECHO, our little group, hoped to play a role as a conscience, to make political delegates remember why they were there, what was truly at stake. And that before their responsibilities to their stakeholders, their political cronies, their first duties was to future generations. I asked them to make their actions reflect their words. If you look at the legally binding declarations that came out of that conference, the Convention on Biodiversity, the Convention on Desertification, and the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, that landmark agreement that set up the COPs, these agreements, these legally binding declarations are radical by today's standards. That was a generation ago. We all know the story after those promises were made. After Rio, instead, we witnessed the rise of the corporate agenda and a much more focus on economic growth instead of planetary health. On the climate file, instead of the world pulling together to do what we knew we had to do, what we agreed to do, we instead watched a campaign of climate denial to confuse the public on the issue, led by the oil and gas sector, who had no intention of losing profits for their shareholders. We as a human society were not able to take the steps that we agreed to in 1992 to stop climate change. Since Rio, we continued to see the decline of biodiversity that is now widely known as the onset of the 6th mass extinction event in the story of life on Earth. Henrique referred to this. And I want to thank Edward Burtynsky for these gorgeous and stark large-scale photos that characterize the human impact on land. Today, the rate of extinction is 100 to 1,000 times the rate of what it should be. The main cause of this one is due to a single species, loss of habitat, invasive species, and human-induced climate change. Well, it's due to a single species, which is us, and we've created loss of habitat and human-induced climate disruption. Not only are we shutting down biological diversity, we are also shutting down diversity in our own human realm, in our ethnosphere. And the ethnosphere is a beautiful concept. It is the collective sum of our human cultures, of our human languages, of our customs, songs, dance, and worldviews. The ethnosphere. And this ethnosphere today is shrinking. In the most recent decades of human existence, everywhere on this planet, the human family has been steadily retreating from its homelands. We've been leaving our family farms, the hunting and gathering grounds. We've been retreating from rural living, leaving life on the land. And we are hunkering down into an urban identity, an identity that is inherently tied to a global capitalist model, joining the masses that become poor when they step into that system. Even as our rural lands are becoming hammered by extreme resource extraction, burning, and pollution and climate changes. In 2014, the urban population on the planet of our global population was 54%, over half for the first time in history. And by 2050, at least 66% of the human family will live in urban centers. So we've gone from being primarily localized, rural, and living on the land to being an urban species and part of a single hegemonic economy that is destroying our shared atmosphere. And one of the losses of this is the loss of language. Loss of language indicates a profound loss of imagination of our human reality. With loss of language comes a deep loss of knowledge, of philosophy, of worldview, and with straight up information. We are losing the knowledge that we had when we lived on the land, intimate biological, ecological knowledge that humans had of the land when we lose that language. And we also lose a whole realm of possibility for how humans could be. You know, the Western capitalist model is not the only option. Other cultures have succeeded for millennia based on profoundly different values and profoundly different economic values. Today, I'm writing my PhD studying the revitalization of the Haida language. I've finished my field research and now I'm doing my data analysis. I've been working with the last first language speakers of Haida Kill and with new speakers of the language who seek to bring the language back. And with this, I salute all those indigenous languages out there fighting to keep their languages allowed. We are also seeing the decline even of economic diversity. And as you've heard in this talk and in the conversation today, the economic forces, the economic values, economic measures are never far away from how we talk. We always have to consider the economy when we're talking about any changes or any kind of human business. But we're losing diversity here as well. And this is, here we're seeing a strip mall in Pennsylvania. Humans everywhere have had very diverse form of economies, but in the 20th, 20th, and 21st centuries, one form of exchange has become to dominate. And this is our globalized capitalist model, which promotes the dominance, especially in recent decades, of global giants, promotes fossil fuel hegemony, and has increased the gulf between the rich and poor, even in the richest country of the world, which is the United States of America. So we are experiencing a decline of diversity on every level. And as a biologist, thinking about the great engine, the great strategies for survival in evolution, diversity has been one of the main strategies and keys to species being able to survive and keep evolving, keep in the game. Diversity of ability to respond to unforeseen changes. So this is a very key thing that we have to be paying attention to. We're reducing diversity, which is the main strategy for survival on so many levels. And there are political consequences of this downward trend of diversity. Many of us do not realize that the war in Syria was catalyzed by the worst drought in their history from 2006 to 2011. So if we think about climate change as one of the pieces of decline and impact on ecological diversity, in Syria, nearly 85% of the livestock died, which caused nearly 1 million people to lose their farms. And those people flooded into cities like Daraa, where water was already scarce. Of course, we saw civil unrest following and protests following the path of the drought. Of course, this led to economic instability of the country, social instability, all of this connected to climate change. Climate refugees are and will be a big part of the forced migration and immigration of human beings. And of course, immigration has been a big factor in the rise of nationalism, the rise of neo-Nazism, and the strongmen who are currently in power. And so therefore, we can see how all of these huge patterns are interconnected, and they are part and parcel of this political rise of anti-immigration nationalism and the issues that we're seeing today as evidenced by the states. And Naomi Klein has called this climate barbarism. So just before the pandemic, we were at kind of a parallel moment to back in 1992. The world had reawoken to the ecological crisis. It took a generation for the issues to come back into the public consciousness as they were in the 1980s and early 1990s, to that intensity where everybody was worried about the environment. And it was so moving for me to march with Greta Thunberg, the young woman from Sweden who started the climate strike movement in 2018. She started this movement alone. And by the time we were at this march in Vancouver in October of 2019, millions of youth around the world were striking for climate justice. The youth of the world are pleading with us to transform, pleading with older generations who have created climate change to do the right thing and to work together to transform our systems and institutions to secure their future. They seek to cut through all of the rationalization for why we have to keep the GDP high and economic growth, and are reminding us of what is truly at stake. And we are finally learning, we are finally realizing what Indigenous peoples have always said, that what we are doing to the land, to the sky and waters, we are doing to ourselves. Planetary health is a field that has emerged a few years ago to focus on looking at human health impacts of human-caused disruptions of the Earth's natural systems. Planetary health is a movement focusing on the intersection between the health of human societies individual and the health of ecological systems upon which we depend. 80% of our overall health status depends on ecological determinants like healthy air, healthy water, and soil. And those are the things that actually then, after that, give rise to our economy and all the other things we depend on to be healthy humans. More and more doctors and even alliances of doctors like the Canadian Physicians for the Environment are stepping forward to address the planetary health issues. And the more we attune ourselves to this field, the more we can see that COVID-19 is a warning. The more we can see from attuning ourselves to this movement that we can understand that learning about this just might propel us, and learning about COVID lessons just might propel us to being able to adequately respond to climate change. What if at this time in lockdown, this experience has set the stage for a massive carbon economy transformation that we absolutely need to see if we are going to actually address climate change? What if this has set the stage for that? Right now is a crucial period when the solution to our current pandemic is on the horizon. The vaccine, we can see it. It's starting to roll out, but we are still right here weathering the storm. Transmission of COVID is still high. So we're in this very interesting space. And in this space, we must be very careful. We can still listen. We can still prepare. And I think that this is the time when we must start to mine for the lessons that we learned in 2020. Figure out exactly everything that we can learn from this experience and decide how we're going to move forward into a new reality in 2021. I say new reality because we know we cannot go back to what was normal. Normal was a not so slowly moving crisis of climate change. Normal was ignoring a crazy level of institutional racism in our societies in North America. And perhaps it was because we were home, because we were humbled, because we were isolated, we were actually able to listen and absorb and empathize with the Black Lives Matter movement, and to finally realize that the death toll of so many Americans, including Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, was unacceptable. And here in Canada, it made us look at our society too, and the prejudices against Black and Brown people that we have equally institutionalized. And the following deaths of Indigenous Canadians, including the shooting of Chantal Moore and Rodney Levy, both in New Brunswick, Joyce Echequan in Quebec, and young Trayvon Chalifoud Desjardins in BC. We too have realized, finally, this is absolutely unacceptable. Last year, as all of us, as all society was in a place of humility and deep listening, we have realized that normal means a framework of institutional racism that we cannot accept anymore. We cannot go back to normal. COVID is showing us oppression rooted in history is continuing today. COVID's toll is disproportionate on marginalized communities and women. And this is exactly true of climate change. Women, Indigenous and Black people, marginalized communities, these are the people who have contributed the least to climate change. And yet they are the ones who are most affected by it today and in the future. Yet these are also the people that may hold our greatest chance at finding solutions to climate change. Here in this picture are Wet'suwet'en matriarchs who are defending their homeland today in Unistoten territory in northern British Columbia. Their clan territory, Unistoten, where they live, where they've had a camp and actually more than a camp, had a small village for the past 10 years, is directly in the corridor where any fossil fuel pipeline from the oil-rich areas of northern BC and Alberta to the coast needs to pass through. So they're in this critical pass where all pipelines, if they were to be built, must pass through. And they have not given permission for construction of the Coastal GasLink LNG pipeline to be built, which is currently in construction. These peoples have never ceded their lands. They've never treated their lands. They've never lost jurisdiction. So these women have been defending their land against pipelines, not only for themselves and their own waters and forests, but for all of us. They know very well that our atmosphere cannot afford any more fossil fuel infrastructure. We can't afford any more expansion of the burning of carbon. They are the last line of defense between building new infrastructure for an industry whose time is up. Today, the work camps nearby for other parts of the LNG pipeline have brought COVID-19 to their community. When you look around the planet at the front lines, where land defenders are the last line of defense for sacred ecosystems, you find that they are the so-called most marginalized people, Indigenous women in this example. And these people are the ones who are holding the line for all of us. Supporting those who are the most oppressed by crises of planetary health like COVID-19 and climate change is necessary for all of us, because their wisdom, their strength, their connection to nature offer us hope that there is a different choice for humanity. They are connected with sustainability principles and ways of living that humanity needs in order to survive. And lastly, these women know how to survive. They have existed and survived through countless assaults. They are survivors, and they know how to get through the coming crises. So climate justice is social justice. We won't find solutions without addressing the power imbalances inherent within our modern systems and institutions. And we have to commit to fighting for equity, anti-oppression, if we are to stop unlivable climate change. And if we are closer to understanding that, because of, oh, hang on, I just lost my spot. If we're closer to understanding that because of our collective experience in this past year, then perhaps COVID has actually prepared us to deal with climate change. It has certainly brought our callous economic growth and growth-focused culture face to face with some humbling and sacred truths that we have to remember if we are to properly deal with climate change. It has taught us or reminded us that, one, nature is the true bottom line. We are living, breathing, eating animals made of flesh and bone and susceptible to disease. This is something we seem to forget living in the global north and working hard to uphold the current industrial complex. COVID-19 has reminded us all that, two, science and information are essential to our survival. Science and technology are tools we've developed in order to analyze more and more information so that we could make greater predictions. And science gave us the iPhone. And suddenly, because of the primacy of economic profit and growth, we have felt that certain aspects of science were very inconvenient. And the science that was telling us that man-made carbon in the atmosphere was creating climate change, very inconvenient. We cannot ignore the science anymore. And COVID-19 has brought that home. Third, COVID has taught us in no no vague terms, that we are all connected. A virus has shown us just how connected we are to each other, how connected we are to China, to England, to the United States. COVID has taught us that we need radical empathy if we are to make it through. Through the pandemic, we have been shown, we have seen time and time again how people are empathetic. We're seeing incredible kindness, neighbors reaching out to each other, acts of kindness through small and large actions, through record-breaking donations to food banks and to NGOs. We're seeing a very human response to the crisis. I want to acknowledge the nurturers out there. So many of you watching have been part of this wave of kindness and support for each other, for us all. The nurturers, those on the front lines, thank you. And also those in our families and communities who are taking care by checking in and figuring out how to support each other in creative ways. Thank you. You are holding us all together. It is in our human nature to nurture, to take care of one another. And this side of us has come through clear and strong in the face of a pandemic, and is so important, especially in what we've seen in recent days and weeks south of the border, with an increase in another culture of violence and hatred. We must respond by continuing to strengthen our radical empathy, our nurturance culture that is opposite of violence. And finally, the teaching that is perhaps the most important of all that COVID-19 has taught us is that we have agency. Each of our actions matter. My own actions, whether or not I choose to wear a mask, to wash my hands, these decisions could result in someone losing their life. Even a year ago, this would have sounded like hysterical lunacy. But now we know this is true. So now we cannot deny that we are powerful. These are hard-earned, uncontestable lessons that we've learned during COVID. Perhaps if we realize the wisdom that we've gained through this hard time, we just might take the right steps that will get us to our goal, a zero carbon economy by 2050. Before I close, I have to say a word about democracy. And just by the way, I use this slide because it's a slide from our community. It was a slide for a political issue that was happening in the southern part of the province with fish farms. And our community got together. We decided to have a gathering to educate ourselves about this political action, and then to send our message of solidarity with people who are trying to fight the fish farms that were damaging salmon stocks in southern BC, because the salmon are connected to us up here, traveling on their migration routes. And to have this event that was about community engagement and believing that we were powerful was a very empowering experience, especially for my son, who's, you can see in the front row, he's in my dad's arms, very happy that we're taking action. So I want to say a word about democracy, and I connected to this slide because it is very, very close with civic engagement. It is about civic engagement. It is about the people emboldening and strengthening our own government through democracy. This is an event that is sponsored today by the City of Kingston, working with a nonprofit, Sustainable Kingston, and other partners, I'm sure. They're working together to increase your community's sustainability, resiliency, and livability. In the midst of the pandemic, we have another crisis, the rise of authoritarian political leadership, the polarization of politics, and the rise of hatred and power. Like climate change, like COVID, all these things we've been talking about, this too is the result of a lack of care in the area of democracy, of how we govern ourselves. And it's also very connected to our current economic framework. It's connected to our measure of success. Today's event is an effort by a civic government to do good, and I just want to say thank you. It's fantastic. We have to maintain or reclaim our public offices and the services that they provide us, reclaim as citizens who want to make our communities better. And we have to fight for this. We have to ensure by our engagement that democracy cannot be for sale. Okay, next slide, please. When you try to think about all of the different things that we need to do to become sustainable, you get this crazy feeling. Why is all of the things that we're doing, why are all these actions bad for the environment? Why is my very Canadian lifestyle damaging my children's climate, my children's atmosphere? And we have to come to a realization that there's a fundamental problem with our operating system, where the framework, which is ultimately one of the aspects that is decreasing our democracy in the world. I was really thrilled to hear Henrique's presentation because I heard an offering for major solutions for addressing climate change. We need an operating system. We need an economy that heals the earth instead of destroys it. We need to shift this operating system for how we conduct our business. We need to re-envision our economy to transform it from one focused on GDP and profit to one that includes the measures of things that are currently externalities, health, that is health, well-being, ecosystem health, resilience, quality of life, just to name a few. The GDP was never meant as an indicator to measure the success of a community. So here is Nicola Sturgeon, First Minister of Scotland, who's mandated a well-being economy in her country. She, along with Prime Ministers of Iceland and New Zealand, are calling for new social indicators to be considered besides traditional GDP data, and for reimagining their economies in service of their citizens' well-being, instead of simply economic growth. And I just wanted to, I'm almost finished, but I just wanted to flag this trend of these forward-thinking governments and thinkers, because these are these large kind of systems thinking ways that we need to start dealing with in order to actually get to a zero carbon economy. Okay, in closing, for the past 14 years, I've lived here in a small rural community. And here, seeing the depth of compassion, care, resilience of the Haida community here, a community that has existed for over 13,000 years on these remote islands, battered by the elements and by a brutal history of colonization. I have every confidence that we as a human family have capacity to become sustainable and to deal with this existential climate challenge. But it's up to us to decide to make that transformation. It's up to us to come together collectively and cast off what is not working. I think that COVID-19 gives us a chance to make that transformation. We have come close to death, and this gives us an opportunity to be honest with ourselves. And our society-wide teachings give us a chance to collectively say, no, we're not going to go back to what we were. We are not going back. We are going to move forward. The 2020s are going to be about transforming the old, crumbling, inequitable carbon economy to a just economy that promotes life and our children's well-being. For those we have lost in the pandemic and for our children. Thank you for listening to what I have to say today.
Wow, thank you, Severn. Couldn't see my head because my camera's off, but my head was going like this a lot while you were talking. Thank you for your we do have a question for you from the group, and if there is any questions, feel free to type them in the Q&A section now. For Severn, so first question for you, dealing with youth engagement and really the boots on the ground. What is is there a way that you found that's the best way to engage, to get folks to really, is there a tip, is there something to get folks engaged civilly and civically?
Yeah, that's a great question when people ask, what can we do? And by the way, an extremely high number of Canadians are very concerned about climate change. I think it's well over 80% of Canadians consider climate change the top issue that faces our nation and faces people. So it's a very high level of understanding that Canadians have that this is a problem, we need to do it. So that's a big deal, because for so long we were kind of wallowing in this weird time where it was still publicly debated whether or not climate change was happening and whether or not humans were contributing to it. Now that's done, that's gone. We, as David said, we have 98% consensus of climate scientists that climate change is happening. And you don't need to be a scientist. I can look out my window and see the weather, the weird weather, and something has changed. So that is a big deal. We're out of that kind of debate. Now we need to tap into what we can do. And there's two things I think about when I think about what I need to do about the environment. One is I need to look at my own lifestyle. I need to look at my own carbon footprint. And so that's the personal, that's the walking the talk. And the other side of the coin, the second thing is we need to get political. And those are the conversations, those are the self-education on the systems change that we need. Yes, we need to turn off our lights. Yes, we need to, if we can, invest in solar panels for our homes, have solar passive buildings, but we also need systems change. And that's where we've got to engage as citizens with our governments like this forum right now, and engage and realize that we have to start organizing so that we can actually help individuals make the right decisions. So those are two, it changes, these answers to what we can do change all the time as we learn more, as current events happen, as different groups come up. Second Harvest is such an amazing example of innovation and solutions that are coming from communities to address community challenges. And so they're always shifting, but I always think of those two pieces that we have to do. We have to do both the personal and the political, and they are two sides of the same coin.
Amazing answer. Thank you so much. At this time, I think we've gotten lots of people thinking a lot right now. We don't have any more questions. I think you've gotten some people are thinking, and then I think that's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful place that you've left us. It's my absolute honor to thank you for your time today, for everything that you've done. I also have anecdotal stories of watching you as a 13-year-old girl, because I'm a year older than you, when you were 12. And I think you've also, your family has helped shape many people. So I thank you for all of the effort and your absolute dedication to what we're doing. I'm just seeing if there's any more questions coming through. There is one. Sorry, I'm not letting you go. I fibbed. What will you first do towards increasing awareness to support, especially solar, with the foundation?
That's a good question. I'm very passionate about the issues that I spoke about in my talk today. I'm very passionate about social justice, and really looking at climate change as a social justice issue, which it is. And, you know, younger generations of activists, younger people understand this so innately. But I think that there's still an idea out there of some that, you know, addressing climate change is an environmental issue, and the environmental issues are separate from human social issues. So, and that's simply not true. Our solutions really lie in solutions oriented in ecological justice, in anti-oppression and anti-prejudice. They are so important. So I'm really looking forward to strengthening those connections. Indigenous empowerment is also something I'm extremely passionate about for so many reasons, but not the least of which is we need Indigenous leadership to get through this bottleneck. They are a source of solutions, of inspiration and knowledge that humanity really needs to draw on today around the world. So Indigenous empowerment, I hope that the DSF can continue to embody what an ally of Indigenous politics means, and more awareness. What else can I say? All of these issues are so interconnected in the political trends that we're seeing today. So I hope that in looking at our solutions, we are focusing on economic solutions, because they're so interconnected to all of this, to the political situations we're in, to climate change, to prejudice in our institutions. And I think that this, the Wellbeing Economy Alliance and the circular economy, these are concepts that are right now the foundation is engaging with, and I hope to continue to explore that, but also to make that very current knowledge and relevant knowledge to Canadians, because I think that those concepts are systemic enough and all-encompassing enough to address the root challenges that are creating so many of our ills. So it's kind of a, you know, I'm in a period of really thinking about the future, and all of these swirling issues that we're really seeing are just so interconnected. And I hope that I can embody that at the DSF, so that we are bringing a different frame of mind to Canadians.
Wonderful. That's a great answer, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you do. Another question for you is, seeing that capitalism is not likely going away, do you think that people changing their buying habits could affect the GDP and be used to drive change?
Over the years, I've gone through phases of deciding that it's all about the individual, about our buying habits and the changes that we can make on that level. And I still believe that that is true if it's in conjunction with greater organizing. We need to organize and collaborate with others to make sure that you know, these corporate giants actually can feel an effect. So the answer is yes, but we also need to organize. Individual action matters, and it matters even more when it's done in conjunction with others.
Great answer. That is all of the questions that we have today. We have some amazing people saying amazing things to thank you. So we'll share some of those great things in the chat box, just in case you can't see them. Again, thank you so much for your time today, Severn. I've had goosebumps, I've had chills, and I've had lots of things during your talk. So I appreciate everything that you have said. So that's our event. So thank you everyone. Thank you for all of the panelists. Thank you for all of the attendees. Thank you to the City of Kingston. Thank you to Sustainable Kingston. You'll see there is a poll that's popping up. Please, this is the first time that the City of Kingston that we have done an online event. Please give us your feedback. We want to make sure that going forward, I think that these kinds of events, really, they help to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. There's no reason why we can't do online events. So I think we should mastering these things. This event has been recorded. and will be posted on the City of Kingston's website. Again, thank you for the City of Kingston for partnering with the event. Thank you to our sponsors, the event sponsors, Queen's University, St. Lawrence College, Empire Life, and we'll see you next year. Thank you, everyone.